Reading from Exodus chapter 16, verses 2 to 4, and then 9 to 15. All about grumbling. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions." Verse 9. Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked towards the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." Thanks be to God.
So who's this on the screen? Who plays Black Widow, guys? Who's that? Scarlett Johansson. Okay, Black Widow's a new film that's come out, and it's a really interesting film. The thing with Scarlett Johansson's character is through conflict, she finds her sister, and in it, her relationship with her sister becomes bigger than the problems. In many hero films, like a Clint Eastwood film or something else, the problems are always bigger than the relationships, aren't they? He rides off into the dark, he does stuff, but the problems are always bigger than the relationships. In this film, it's really interesting, is she kind of acts like herself under pressure. That's the thing that you notice about some of the Marvel films, is a lot of the characters under pressure still act like themselves. Unlike the Batman, who's like quite a dark character in the other franchise, in the Marvel films, many of the characters act like themselves and endure suffering. And that's like my intro for thinking about that reading that we heard from Michael. In the Bible reading, I wonder, when you look at the Israelites, do they act like themselves under pressure and endure suffering well? What do you think? It's an interactive talk today. What do you reckon? They act. Yeah, go for it. Yeah. No, Dad? So well, let me tell you the answer there. I'll start us off because it's not a trick question. They moan. If you want me to summarize the Israelites in the wilderness, it's like moaning. Are we there yet, Moses? Yeah, he's been in the car and the kids are like, are we there yet? You got that TV show. And like the Israelites are there. Are we there yet? Do they endure suffering well? Well, I don't think so. I quite like being a vicar, but I wouldn't like to be Moses. Exodus 16 verse 2, they moan like children hungry. The community grumble against Moses and Aaron, 16 verse 2. If only we died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. That's called catastrophizing and exaggerating, isn't it? You've ever been there? You switched off, you turned round to someone and go, if only we hadn't gone on holiday and it rained for a week. Or if only you hadn't. We've never done that, have we? If only you hadn't. The Israelites moan, right? But the one thing they get right is their leaders turn to God. I'm going to go to the next slide. This has got lots of little writing because it's the Bible verses. One thing in their favour is they hear from God and Moses walks with him. Okay? They moan, if only we died. And then the Lord says to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven and the people will need to go out each day. And I want us to notice this, is that in this story, God is not unhappy with our complaints. Right? They complain. I expected to go to them and God being upset with their complaining. Actually, at this point, God isn't unhappy with their complaining in the story. God gives them bread and manna. He gets upset later when they keep complaining. He's like, well, I've given you meat and 2 veg kind of thing, and you're still complaining. But actually, what we talked about earlier of Yasmin being honest, well, it's been a bit difficult and stuff. Well, the Israelites are saying it's difficult. But they bring their difficulties to God. And the essence of being Christians is we have a God to bring our difficulties to, but the choice as Christians is whether we bring them to God or not, or whether we do stuff on our own. So we're going to briefly, because I can pick up the vibe, we're going to look at 4 mistakes the Israelites did, okay? Let's see what they could have done. So mistake 1 was the moaning, okay? But what was that symptomatic of? Let's go to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? That's great. Making our problems bigger than our relationships, okay? So this is one for all of us. When we have difficulties, which get bigger, the problem, and we start moaning at other people, or the relationship, and we see the problem, the relationship is more important than the fact that, you know, I don't know, our kids have dropped ink on the floor, or whatever it is. The mistakes of the Israelites was they made problems bigger than their relationship with God. They were like, oh my goodness. But Moses made his relationship with God bigger than the problems, and then he calmed down the family. Many of us have that role of Moses where we go. Other people are just like, isn't it awful? Isn't it terrible? If only this and if only that. And the way to respond to that is not just to get angry and go, rah, rah, and then it all spirals out. But actually, for us to try and connect with God, to calm ourselves, and then make the relationship bigger than the problem. And what often happens is, you then find the other person calms down when we synchronize with them. As we're calm, it calms the room. It's what in psychology and in business they call being a non-anxious presence at work. The second mistake was whining rather than acting like their true selves. The Israelites you just feel like they're going through the desert like a bunch of toddlers. That's how it's depicted. Why this? Why that? It's just awful. Because they've left Egypt and they haven't got to where they want to be, and in the middle set is just rubbish. And instead of taking 3 weeks, it takes them 40 years because they're moaning. And I think the community whine and are ungrateful. And Moses was more consistent than them. He was not perfect. He does moan at God, and God judges him later, right? And it's not like just expresses his complaint, but he just lost his rag completely. But Moses acted like his true self more than everyone else. And that's your job as parent, as leader, to try and act like your best self, not your triggered self. And then the third place is, this one is really big, and this one is really tricky for many of us, is that the Israelites make a choice to stay immature, okay? They stayed the same for 40 years, but being mature means not letting my pain ruin my family's day, ruining my family's life, and actually getting enough healing from myself so that therefore the things that happen to me don't cascade onto my family. And actually that that requires me to be able to return to joy from anger. Like I can really identify with anger, and I've had to learn how to return to relationship and return to joy and connect with others and to slow down the anger in my life. Other of us get stuck in sadness, or other of us get stuck in shame. And actually, as Christianity, part of our calling is to return to joy from these deep emotions and then not to let them burden our family. And actually, the Israelites really didn't deal with that. And actually, that was part of their trouble. And the last one is, in suffering, do you become bitter or better? That's a great title of a book. B_TTER, you get to decide. That's actually a book title. And actually, in suffering, the Bible calls us to endure hardship well. And all but 2 of the Israelites don't make it to the promised land as a sign of God's judgment. The rest got bitter, and those 2 got better. So we're not, let's go to the next slide. We're coming into land here. We're not called to be superheroes. Who's this guy? Black Panther. Who plays the Black Panther? Ooh. Does anyone know? Yes. Chadwick Boseman. He plays the Black Panther. We are not called to be superheroes, but we do have a choice. And here's our daily choice. It's spelled rare. You want to go to the next slide? And this idea comes in this book that I'm recommending for you to read. Our daily choice is to fall into the Exodus traps or grow our spiritual and emotional maturity. You can let your problems be bigger than your relationships, or you can remain relational with God and others. You can let painful emotion dominate, or you can act like yourself. You can stay stuck or return to joy, or you can grow bitter or better in suffering, or you can endure hardship well. Now, those things can be really tricky. And if you've got a real weakness in one, we may need to come for prayer and for some healing. But that's our challenge as a church over the next 6 months, is to remain relational with God and others through what we go through, act like our best selves, to return to joy when we're going through emotional difficulties, endure hardship well as a community. And if we can do that, actually as a community and help one another, that's how we can address, as a small community here, the mental health epidemic that we've got around us. Because if as a community we can together return to joy from painful emotions, we can remain relational with God and others, then we've got the chance to recover well. And that's what we're called to do. So I've got some questions to finish. And there's a bit of a small writing so I could get it on the screen. So remaining relational. Here's a question. Do you splurge over others when things don't go well? Or do you use troubles to grow together with others? When you disagree with others, do you tend to get closer to them? Or do you pull apart? Quite a challenge. Many of us have never even thought, actually, I can use troubles to help me get closer to people. Okay? So that's the question. Problems bigger than relationships, or relationships bigger than problems? And the second one, I'm not going to do the others, is act like yourself. Do people know what they're going to get from you? Are you relatively the same person when things are good or things are bad? Now, we don't want to dissociate and kind of lose all emotion completely. That's not healthy. If you've got no emotion and we're a machine, I'm not saying that. But actually, do people walk on eggshells around us if a topic comes up? Or can we be there for people? Our final slide, Josh. So here's the question. You've got a choice. You can fall into the Exodus traps, or you can grow your spiritual and emotional maturity. If you want to develop with that, I'd get some of the handouts from the back. I do recommend this book. I read this about 3 years ago. Waited till I thought it's the right time to introduce it. I think for us in COVID time, it's called Rare Leadership, but really it's about being a rare Christian, one that is mature and growing and able to help others. And I would recommend that to all of us. So we sat down enough. Can we stand up for a minute? And I want you just to turn around and face someone else and just ask the question, will you get better or bitter this week?